caught my wife cheating with our neighbor, so I divorced her and destroyed their lives. Now she's begging me to take her back while I'm sleeping with multiple women. I'm 67 years old now and remarried to my first wife. She's the only wife I ever had. We met in the summer of 1975 right after graduating high school, and we've been together ever since, except for a year of being divorced. Both of us were virgins, as was the norm in those days. I was living at home and working, and she had an apartment with her friend. But we saw each other every day and had sex every day. Good times. In the spring of 1976, she became pregnant, which was my fault, and we were married in June. It was an earlier time when, if you got a girl pregnant, you married her. We both had average factory jobs in the Rust Belt and had the basics to support our life. After having our daughter in December 1976, I became very motivated to improve our lives, seeking a different path in employment and for our future family. I wanted my spouse to be an at-home mom and wife. I found technical training, and after completion, started a career in mining, which was highly paid. We moved to another state for the employment opportunity, soon bought our first home, and settled in. This was in 1979. Our married family life was good, and my wife could be a stay-at-home mom and wife, and I was good with that. In 1982, we sold our home and bought a bigger one in a new neighborhood. We met another couple that was our age, had a child like us, and were at our own economic level, and we became best friends and hung out all the time. My wife and the other couple's husband, who I will call Gray, became very good friends. Gray was an athlete in high school, a scratch golfer, athletic build, and competitive. In early 1983, my wife and I decided to have our second child, and she soon became pregnant. Our son was born uneventfully in early 1984. In late '84, the mining industry had a severe downturn, and I found myself unemployed. My father had started a business doing work for the mining industry, and I decided to help him with the business, which was a startup and required a lot of work with many, many hours. In 1985, my wife became pregnant again, which was not planned. Our daughter was born late in 1985. The business was at an inflection point, and I was working 70 to 80 hours a week, and money was marginal. At this time, I had little time at home with the kids or my wife and not much time to socialize with our couple friends. I continued to notice the closeness between my wife and Gray, but I had 100% trust in my wife and never thought about a problem. In 1987, my dad, who was a Korean combat veteran and very wise, asked me one day on a business trip if my wife and I were swapping with Gray and his wife. I asked him why the hell he would ask me that. Dad says, "It's common knowledge, son, that two blue-eyed people cannot produce a brown-eyed child," which my youngest daughter was. I got very mad at my dad, in full denial, and said there was no way. He did not know what he was talking about. Dad took the hint and shut up. The next day home, I asked my wife point blank if she was having an affair with Gray, and she denied it and got mad at me for asking. Just friends was the answer. Being so tunnel-visioned on the business, I let it go and continued on. The business started becoming successful, and more income was coming in. The kids were growing, our family was thriving, and my wife wanted to work outside the home, so she came to work for our business and ran the office. In 1992, we built a new home in a better school district and moved not far from our old home. Our assets were becoming more substantial, and we were on a steep trajectory financially. I was still working 60+ hours a week. My wife had become close to a female employee at our business, and they were friends. One day in 1995, my wife's friend came into my office, shut the door, and said she had something to tell me. She confessed that the guilt of knowing was eating at her. She told me that my wife and Gray, whom she knew, had been having an affair for almost 12 years. She also told me that Gray had dumped my wife in 1994 and that she had sex with one of Gray's friends after the breakup. She then said that she was quitting and would not be coming back. I haven't seen her since that day. I instantly went numb and cold. Later that evening, after all the employees had gone, I confronted my wife. She initially denied everything, but then admitted to a one-time encounter with Gray. Then something clicked in my head, and I remembered my dad. I asked, "Oh my God, our youngest daughter is not mine, is she?" She broke down into hysterics, crying, sobbing, incoherent. I was trying to confirm my worst suspicions. I took her home in silence. I went upstairs and started packing. I moved out that evening, and she stayed clear of me. Cell phones were still primitive in 1995, but I had one, as did she. She called me the next day, and I told her I thought she was lying about the one-time deal and asked if she knew our daughter was Gray's. She denied it, and I said, the conversation is over. Within 2 weeks, I had moved into an apartment and was in contact with a law firm that represented our business. The law firm had 2 divorce attorneys, and one was a pit viper, an expensive pit viper at that. I met with the attorney, and he asked me what outcome I wanted. They told me that since my daughter was 9 years old, the courts would not allow me to reduce the child support. Our state was a no-fault, 50/50 state, so half of everything was gone. Since I was convinced my daughter was not mine, they said a court-ordered blood test would be required. If she wasn't mine, no alimony. DNA testing was in its infancy back then and expensive. I asked the attorney what my options were to ruin Gray and my wife's lives. The attorney said we could pursue paternity fraud and alienation of affection. At that time, in my state, this was possible in civil court. I told him I wanted to drain Gray and my wife financially and drag them through the mud. He warned me that the downside would be involving our kids, which would obviously destroy our family and possibly my relationship with my children. The attorney told me the cost would be $50,000 plus, and remember, this was in 1995. I talked to my dad about it, and he said he didn't want me to harm the kids, but it was my decision. In the meantime, my wife kept calling me, and I finally got her to admit that our daughter was probably Gray's and that she did indeed carry on a multi-year affair, but she insisted they only slept together 7 times in over a decade. When I asked why she did it, she said she felt lonely and ignored by me, and at times, I wasn't loving towards her. She said she did it for the attention and affirmation of her desirability. When I asked why she was having unprotected love-making with him, she said she was just stupid. I went to Gray's place of business to confront him. When he saw me, he ran out the back of the shop, hopped into a car, and took off. The next day, I called him and asked, what the F? His exact answer was, crap happens, and that my wife's daughter was my problem. I asked him about the money I had spent raising his child, and he said if I wanted to play it that way, he would insert himself into her life. Wrong thing to say to me. I told him, mother effer, you cannot compete with me financially or legally. I will bring a crap storm to you and your family and drain every dollar you have defending yourself in court. Even if it costs me $1 million, I'll F you up and destroy your life. Click. I hung up the phone, and that was the last time I ever talked to him. My next call was to Gray's wife, telling her the entire story and letting her know I was considering suing him. I told her she better get half her assets quick. I had raised my daughter for 9 years, and this was not her fault. But if I go scorched earth, this will harm her and my other kids and cause hard feelings. Even though my daughter wasn't biologically mine, she was mine emotionally. I loved her and continued to support her. There was no problem for me. The dilemma was whether to get revenge and enjoy Gray and my wife's suffering, or to let it go and just get a divorce. After a week, I decided to use the nuclear option only if necessary, to get the best deal I could from my wife. As it turned out, Gray's wife took him to the cleaners, half his assets, big alimony, and child support. In his divorce, my wife was deposed and admitted under oath that she had cheated with him. His wife dropped the bomb on him. He had to sell his business to satisfy her settlement. I laid this out to my wife, what I was planning, and she was horrified. She asked me what I wanted, and I laid out the divorce terms: fair asset split, no alimony, and visitation. She agreed. My attorney drew up the paperwork. Her attorney made some slight changes, and we filed. She kept saying she wanted to work out our marriage, that she was so sorry. I told her I needed the entire truth, no more trickle truth information. She owed it to me. The first cheating was in 1982, before we got pregnant. She got pregnant with our middle child. She said she used protection with him, and I was sure my son was mine because we share many physical attributes. She still claimed it was only 7 times, that they were on again, off again with the affair over the years. She and Gray used his home, my bed, the front seat of a pickup truck, and our bathroom. She said it was over in 1991. But one night when I was out of town, the business burglar alarm went off. They called her at home. She called Gray to meet her there for support with the alarm police. And afterward, they had sex in my office. And wait for it, for old time's sake. I remember her calling me after she got home to cover her sass, but Gray had shown up to support her with the alarm resolution. In 1995, she said she had a one-time thing with one of Gray's friends in the back of a pickup truck. She put on a toy show for him, and one thing led to another, and they made love. He was 20 years older than her. Another non-answer as to why. She also confessed to me that on the occasion she had sex with Gray in our bed, she did him unprotected in the late afternoon. and that evening she allowed me to go down on her. When I asked why, she said the same thing: she was stupid and mad at me. The divorce was finalized over the next year, and as a single guy, I was in the mode of getting even with her. The truth is, I dated as many women as I could, and I had a body count going. No married women, no attached women, everyone was looking for a relationship, and I was not. This would have been the end of my story, living the single life, enjoying the kids, and dealing with the pain and suffering brought on by the betrayal. However, about a year after the divorce, my kids were always talking about how their mom had changed. They kept pushing me to talk to my ex-wife, wanting the family back together. My oldest daughter, now 21 at the time, acted as an intermediary. My ex-wife offered to go to counseling because she wanted to see if there was a future with me and wanted to make amends for her betrayal. I was feeling very empty from having mindless lovemaking with so many women. I really missed my kids and family at times, remembering the good times with my wife. So I agreed. After many months of counseling, we started dating again, and the old spark came back. We dated for several months until sex started, and we began talking about remarrying. I believed she was remorseful and had indeed changed. Since then, our marriage has been faithful to each other but completely loveless. After the first few years, our marriage is mechanical, and she has ongoing issues with her guilt from her betrayal and my body count. For the first 20 years of our remarriage, I was working hard in the business. Our assets piled up, the kids went to great schools, and they all became successful. I've since sold the business and am now retired. But I still have issues with her betrayal from 40 years ago, and the biological missing link to my daughter. Every time I talk to or look at my daughter, I'm reminded of the images of her getting pregnant by Greg in the front seat of his pickup truck and her doing him in my bed while I was working my sass off. She was giving away her sass. That's a tough thing to ever resolve. The images of me consuming Greg's love juice from my wife are devastating, and I avoid love making with her, even sex, for years. It seems the older I get, the worse things bother me. I see that image constantly. So, my life is a loveless marriage, and I'm too old now to make a change. With minor health issues and an unwillingness to change, we're just friends now, living together until one or both of us dies. Happiness, joy, love, desire, sex, intimacy, they're all gone and will never come back. Most of our assets are in trust for our kids, grandkids, and now great-grandkids. With only a few years of life left, divorcing is not worth the financial and legal pain. The moral of the story is, folks, do not remarry a cheater. You will never get the images out of your mind and will constantly be on the defensive, fearing another cheating episode. I should have stayed clear of her and remained single. Don't make the same mistake I did. Thanks for listening, and take this warning from an older, wiser man who made a life-altering mistake. Story 2. Throwaway account because my brother and I communicate on Reddit, and I can't risk anyone seeing this. Okay, for background, I, 24 male, live a very different life than the majority of my family. I didn't graduate high school but got a GED and started working as a welder and hunting guide. The rest of my family is pretty successful. For instance, my father is a lawyer and my mom used to be an RN. Brothers own companies. Sister got married to a lawyer, etc. I'm glad my family found a lot of success, but they can be very shallow and often put me down for what I do for work. My mom will make comments like, "When are you going to school to get a real job?" or stuff like that. They didn't want to pay for welding school, so I worked at an auto shop to pay my own way through. They often go on vacations and cruises without me because I won't be able to appreciate the culture, or food and other BS like that. I love them, but I have been slowly pulling away from them over the last few years since I can tell that we live different lives and they have no interest in sharing their lives with me. Now, my grandfather's brother Mike and I have always been pretty close. Mike and I used to go hunting when I was pretty young. And even though Mike was also working in law, he and I shared a love of the outdoors and nature. About a year ago, Mike was diagnosed with cancer and has quickly gone downhill in the last few months. I have taken a lot of time off of work to care for him since he is my oldest relative, and no one else wants to take care of a frail, sick old man for some callous reason. His wife died 15 years ago and he doesn't have any children. He recently asked me if taking care of him was hurting me financially, and I told him that I was cutting back on hours at work, but I loved him more than any of my other family members, so it was my pleasure to take care of him. The next time I went to visit him, he revealed to me that he was having his will changed and would be willing his hunting cabin. It's not a cabin, it's a small single-family home with power and running water on 70+ acres to me, along with about $100,000 to get it fixed up and start your life. He wants the rest of his estate to be liquefied and donated to different causes that he was passionate about. Mike is actively dying now. He asked to be taken out of hospice so he can die at home with his dog, who will also be coming with me when he passes away. In his own home, my family was talking about how much money Mike has, and how when he dies they want to convert his hunting cabin into a summer vacation home, and how they were going to fund a big memorial trip to Europe on his dime, since we are his last remaining family and they expect the majority of his wealth to be broken up between us all. They do not know that everything is being donated and I am getting the house and some of his money. I know that if, when they find out about what Mike has so graciously done for me, they will rip me down and curse his name. I don't want to be around for the fallout. I plan to set aside some money for renovating the house for full-time use and start a small welding company someday. So, would I be the idiot if I cut them out of my life as soon as Mike is gone? Seeing this new greedy side of them has soured me a lot, and I don't know if I can even stand being around them anymore. Even though I know that Mike always said that your family should be everything to you. TLDR, my great uncle is willing a large plot of land and a lot of money to me. Greedy family wants to use it for a trip to Europe. Update, Mike passed away shortly after my last post. He died peacefully in his sleep. His last waking hours were spent with me, Maisie, and the nurse that was caring for him. He is buried next to his late wife. He lived a good life. Some of his last words to me were, "We had a pretty good run, didn't we?" The will issue was hilarious to me and was a great pain reliever. Mike is always looking after me, even after his death, because watching the bombs fall in real time was like chicken soup to my grieving soul. Yes, Mike did leave the cabin and money to me. He also left me his guns, his dog and her stuff, and his fishing poles, tackle, and a few mementos from over the years. He changed the will 3 years ago and simply never told me or anyone else in the family. He left various trinkets for other members of our family that were pretty on the nose. For instance, he left my father, who spent a long time complaining about the contractors doing work on the house, a bag of old hand tools. My sister got a box of wine glasses. One of my brothers got a drawer full of pens and pencils for your blossoming legal career. He also gave all of us some money for a round of beer in his honor. Watching everyone go from fake sadness to excitement, to horror and disgust was quite the trip. My mom kicked the pot of flowers outside the office so hard she tipped it over. My father just stared out the window in silence for a really long time. Oldest brother held it together until we made it home and then started screaming and swearing about getting an effing box of pencils as a thank you for being part of his life. I have been moved from the disappointment son list to the crap list. As some of you noted, they weren't exactly angry about the cabin and the money Mike left me, but more so his larger assets that were being liquidated and donated. That drove them completely insane. The main target of their abuse was the primary organization that Mike willed the rest of his estate to. And other than an initial small explosion and some snide comments, they seemed to take it in stride. I haven't spoken to them much ever since Mike's passing and the will issue. There are still issues and such that need to be worked out, and I was told that could last up to a year. The cabin has been locked up. I set up some cameras and a gate alarm. I am moving in slowly, hopping between here and my apartment until my lease is up. It's definitely dated and I'm currently working through renovations and repairs. Because my phone number is tied to my work, I didn't want to change it. Just opted to block everyone except my mother in case something really bad happened. After a few days of her complaining, questioning why Mike left me something so nice, she quieted down. Last week she began calling and texting me again and telling me it was an emergency. I spoke on the phone with her, and lo and behold, it was not an emergency. They want me to donate the cabin and land to my sister since she's thinking about starting a family and wants to raise her future children holistically. I told my mom that my sister and her husband have a double income and a lovely house in a completely different state than me, and if they wanted to move out to the country they were completely able to do so, but I would not be giving them my land. She then suggested they buy it from me for $200,000, which is far, far less than it is worth. I said no. I got everything from I'm a selfish bastard, to if I don't support my sister's dreams of raising her kids in the countryside, I'm dead to her, to Mike would want me to give the cabin and land over, to see if we ever do anything for you ever again. You entitled idiot. I feel like it should have been harder to hear those things, but it just feels like they're trying to get me to give up what my great uncle willed to me, and it made me angry rather than sad. My sister also got on the phone to cry and say it was her and her husband's dream to raise their kids specifically on Mike's land. I kind of felt bad saying no to her then, but in hindsight she's never mentioned it before, so maybe this is a new development. Since then, they've been contacting me by email, social media, and the like, hounding me to let my sister buy the cabin and land. So, despite my best efforts, the people of Reddit are right once again. I should have gone completely no contact. I've deleted my socials, and since I've moved job locations, they don't know where I am currently working. They do, however, know where my house is. Sometime while I was at work, my mom and sister drove over and knocked on the doors, tried to open the side door, and looked in the windows. On my doorbell camera, my mother very clearly tells my sister not to touch anything so he can't sue. I am thinking of putting up a locking gate. Right now it latches, but does not lock. Everyone is now blocked, and I am putting together a list of people that would need to be notified of a phone number change since I want to change my number. Not really sure how to go about keeping them from walking onto my property. About 2 weeks ago, when I came back to my apartment, my parents were both waiting for me to confront me about how devastated my sister is that her future children won't have the experience of growing up in the country. I'm kind of afraid that they might camp out at the property until I give in. I put up no trespassing signs, and I hope that's enough. I know one of my brothers drove by a while back because he snapped me a picture of the road my house is on. Other than that, I am well, Maisie is well, and Mike is laughing from the grave. I'll stick around a little longer here, and then I'll be logging out of this account permanently. P.S. If anyone has any suggestions for how to find a good dog groomer, please let me know. Mike had a groomer for Maisie, but now that we've moved, they are 6 hours away, and I can't keep taking her there. She is shedding a lot, and Mike was firm that she can't be shaved. I have some brushes for her, but I don't know jack crap about brushing a dog. Also, she has a lot of bandanas and bows that Mike had her wear, but I think I'm tying them too tight because she doesn't seem to like wearing them. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you really like our videos, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Have a great day.